Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Professor Bart Kay is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his first appearance on episode 445 of Boundless Body Radio, which was our most downloaded episode of 2023. Professor Bart Kay is a former senior lecturer in cardiovascular and respiratory physiology, exercise physiology, nutrition, research methods, and statistics. Professor Kay has published a number of peer-reviewed research and review articles, as well as many book chapters. Bart Kay has successfully taught aspects of physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, metabolism and nutrition, and research design and statistics in 2001, both in the United Kingdom and in Australasia. He has consulted regarding optimal physical performance to the New Zealand All Blacks, the National Rugby League Referees Association, the Royal Australian Defence Force, and the Royal New Zealand Army. You can find him on YouTube at Professor Bart Kay main channel and on Facebook at Nutrition Science Watchdog. You can also find him on the Odyssey video platform, which is also at Nutrition Science Watchdog. Professor Bart Kay, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks, Casey. It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be here.
It is such an honor to host you. As I mentioned in the introduction, your episode was the #1 episode that we did as far as downloads last year. I think that says something to the amount of your knowledge and the way that you can speak to things and make things very easy to understand. To return the favor, I wanted to be the first one to come onto the show and inform you of something that just happened around here. You live in New Zealand, so not too close to the United States, and it happened here. So I wanted to warn you, I am blessed to get research from the American Heart Association. If you haven't heard of them, it's a wonderful organization that has our best interests at heart, literally at heart. And I just wanted to let you know that based on an abstract, that if you do intermittent fasting, you have a 91% increased risk of deaths by heart disease. I wanted to tell you personally, I know you typically only eat one meal a day, so I hope you take that to heart, literally take it to heart from the American Heart Association and change your behavior so you don't die and we can keep doing these.
Or we could talk about what's wrong with that study.
Study?
It wasn't, well, first of all, it wasn't a study. It's not yet a study because it's actually not published. These are unpublished observations that are being spoken about here. It is in a non-representative group of individuals for the general population. It's a special population. And at the end of the day, none of these kind of studies have the capacity, the ability to inform us on risk, hazard, cause, effect, or anything similar. These studies are actually not even science, even the ones that do eventually get published. This is tribalism, this is patch protection, this is propaganda, this is smoking, this is anything but science. So I would warmly recommend that folks with more than about 3 brain cells ignore absolutely everything that such organizations, including the AHA, have to say on any topic, actually. Anyway, there you go.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. I just got back from the Collaborative Science conference in Las Vegas that was held by Dave Feldman. The primary topic of discussion was all about lean mass hyperresponders and cholesterol. And being inside a conference room where everybody is extremely careful with how they word things, what we know, what we don't know, what this study says, what this study absolutely does not say, being so careful about some of these things, to then come home and see something like that, like it almost made me like reminisce the days of like the World Health Organization coming out and saying that like meat caused cancer, because you actually had to like dig into the data and understand like what hazard ratios were. Like you had to do at least a little bit of work to show how stupid these things are. This one's like nothing. They're getting worse and worse. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Discipline in science is one of those things that when I first started in science some 2.5 decades ago, it was there. It was what I was taught. It was still the thing. It was still the way science was done, as far as I could tell from what I was being taught at the school I was at. Steadily, from that point forward, it seemed to be an erosion of the scientific discipline over time, to the point where about 5 years ago, when I decided that was the end of that for me and I wasn't going to be involved in this industry anymore, that university learning had turned from the bastion of knowledge production, discipline, all of that into something else entirely. It had been taken over by a certain sector, shall we say, of individuals who think of themselves as progressive for some reason, when actually what they did is regress science several thousand years.
Yep.
To the point now where, it's difficult to get sense out of most scientists, actually, even. So we're better off without it.
Better off without that. Thank you very much. So recently you made actually 2 appearances. I just learned today of your second appearance on the Ultimate Health podcast with Jesse Chappis, kind of a mutual friend of ours. I loved the first episode that you did so much that I wanted to reach out to you to host you again to talk about some of the topics that you expressed. And I have to say the thing I liked the most about it was as you were talking about the benefits of a carnivorous diet, you drew a hard line by saying like, this is a species appropriate diet. We need 0 carbohydrate or non-animal foods in our diet. And my personal diet is 90 to 95% that diet. And I thought like, okay, well, he's making such a strong stand on the fact that we don't need anything else besides animal products. Yet you also said that your diet is not 100%, it's about 90 to 95%. And I was curious by that. And the way you presented it was, look, I'm a human too. I would love to be 100%. You certainly have, and I definitely want to talk about that today. But I love the fact that you said these things are around. I do like to dabble in some of these things. I know it's not the best for me, and I do pay the price. I thought that was a really genuine and open way to discuss your own personal diet. I think it's very authentic. So I wanted to applaud you for that. And maybe you could comment on that. There's a little bit of a dissertation there, or I'm sorry, a dissonance there where like you believe one thing, but also it's not that easy to actually do that one thing 100% of the time.
Right. That is true for myself. I am hardwired as a hedonist. It's been in my personality structure from day one. I also express a certain form of autism, which is known as the demand avoidance kind of autism. And the way that presents largely is that if anybody tells me I must do such and such, including me telling myself I must do such and such, then I'm going to run away and do the opposite thing, at least to some degree. It is a flaw. It's an absolute flaw, and I wish it wasn't part of my personality structure. I wish I could adhere 100% because the health benefits of being 100% versus 95 are actually vast, hugely more than the 5% penalty for the 5% transgression that you might expect. It's completely unreasonable. That said, there are people that I could point to that I know personally who absolutely are 100% and do adhere and don't have a problem doing that. Their personalities allow them to do that. And all we can do is look up to those folks and try and emulate them as best as we can, I think. But I'm not going to turn 52 years of life experience around and change my entire personality structure within just a few years that I've really been thinking about and trying to do the carnivore diet 100%. So, yeah, I think it was important for me to say that publicly and be authentic because a lot of the people running around saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do the other thing, otherwise we'll come for your card. You'll have to hand in your carnivore card. You never really were a carnivore. You did it wrong and you need to be publicly named and shamed. I wanted to head that off by saying, look, I'm telling you what is ideal as far as I can tell based on my quite extensive knowledge of human physiology, etc. However, I'm not claiming to be doing this exactly. I'm claiming to be getting close. You need to know that. And really, that's all I was trying to say.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. And I think you're right in the sense that we talk about carnivore and we forget that not everybody thinks or knows that we are talking like you have to only be beef, salt, and water all the time. Like there are steps that you can take, and your progression was very similar to my progression. Like it doesn't start with I'm going to be ultra strict. I'm just going to start to kind of like understand this low carbohydrate thing and see where that leads, and eventually it leads to something that becomes a little bit cleaner. It's possible in the beginning, but it gets there over time. And so last time we had you on, we talked a little bit about your interest in nutrition and how that led. I want to know this time about your progression through nutrition and how you yourself are feeling, because I've heard you say that taking that last step to 100% carnivore, your health improved vastly. I'd love to hear about that, but also like what steps along the way of your diet progression helped you in your own personal health?
Right. So right throughout my childhood, adolescence, and most of my adult life, up to probably about age 38 or so, I was consuming, well, when I was a child and an adolescent, I was consuming a standard diet because that's what we did, that's what we knew, that's what my parents knew, that's what they fed me, so that's what I continued to do when I left home, etc. This is all before I undertook any training, by the way. Then the carnivore, the ketogenic lifestyle approach had a new blossoming. It was enjoying being in vogue, if you like. About, I think it was about 27 years ago, something like that. And I came across that, and being the sort who was hardwired to do the exact opposite of what had been told to do, obviously I grabbed it with both hands straight away and said, right, let's do this. To that point, I had suffered with nearly every digestive disorder and problem you can probably name or think about at some point. Plus, my mental health was absolutely in the can and had been for years. We're talking severe bipolar, depressive tendencies. At one point, I had agoraphobia, believe it or not. For a year, I never left the house.
Wow.
People don't know this about me. It's not something I talk about a lot, but I have spoken about it. All of that, it seems, was underpinned by the toxicity, the inflammation, the immune reaction to feeding myself plant materials. When I went to the ketogenic approach, much of that material and much of the material that was particularly problematic for me had been removed from my diet. And coincident with that was an improvement in my digestive health and my mental health. The other thing I forgot to mention was I had severe fibromyalgia as well, whole body.
Wow.
Which was quite debilitating as well. All of that kind of improved 80% on the ketogenic approach. Wind forward a few years to when people started talking about the carnivore diet. That was another thing that immediately made sense to me. Oh, wow, I wonder why we didn't think of this before. Of course, I had to check it out. Are these people telling the truth about the anthropology that underpins this? Are humans really adapted and evolved to eating a diet consisting of almost entirely meat and fat? Turns out the answer was yes, absolutely unequivocally, without any question. I'm in. Well, I'm in 95% because it's me. So that was kind of 9 years, I think, that I've been taking that approach. And over that time, my health has improved again quite significantly. But there is that gap between where I know my health can be and where it is on the basis of my ongoing behavior status. And as you alluded to, Casey, there have been a couple of periods where I've done, for example, 90 days, 100% adherence for a challenge to make a series of videos or to help out my friend Coach Raymond with his getting across his message to people and all of that. And yeah, the results of that have been stunning. People can look at those on my channel. They're there for people to see if they want to. So that was kind of my pathway. So really, to summarize, going from a position of every digestive disorder and problem you could probably think about, whole body fibromyalgia and poor mental health, to where I am today. I think it's miraculous.
Yeah, it really is. And you would think it was a miracle had you not heard this story repeated over and over and over with all these anecdotes that are piling up everywhere. It's quite remarkable. I'm so glad that you mentioned Coach Raymond, mutual friend of ours. I got to meet him last year in person. He's a really great guy. One of his concepts is kind of what you're talking about here, which is priming. And I guess kind of Coach Raymond's idea is that when you're basically coming from any diet to a carnivore diet, you might be pretty much devoid of nutrients. Can you talk about your interpretation of priming and what your experience was like when you tried it?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that don't know, here is what priming is. You would take the volume of meat and fat that you would eat as 100% carnivore in a 1 meal a day situation, your whole food for the day. And instead of eating that once, you'll eat that 3 and 4 times. You're basically fooling yourself to rifting. And you do that for up to 2 weeks before you kick into the next part of Raymond's program. And you've alluded to it. The reason for it is because most people coming from, even from a keto background or even from a sort of dirty carnivore background or whatever, most of those people actually are expressing quite significant nutrient deficiencies. And so what Raymond's really doing with this priming is giving the person a 2-week period of what is ostensibly overfeeding to ensure that all the nutrients a person needs are on hand for the next part of the program, which does involve some fasting, by the way, full body recomposition. So during the 2 weeks of priming, the experience of it is, you'd think, wouldn't you, that you can eat all the food you want. There's no limit. You'd think, hallelujah, that's fantastic, wouldn't you? It's not fantastic. It's horrible. It's unpleasant in the extreme to be packing your body so full so many times a day with meat and fat. By the end of it, I was feeling like, if I never see food again in my life, that'll be just fine. Obviously, that's not true, but that's how you feel. That's how I felt, I should say, at the time. However, it did allow me to have everything I needed on board in terms of nutrients and to go forward and do the fasting stuff with absolutely no challenge or problem whatsoever. That was easy as pie because I wasn't suffering physiologically. I had everything I needed. Now, a lot of people that prime will gain a few pounds during that 2 weeks, obviously, because you're eating a lot of food. Some people don't. Other people actually lose weight priming. So there goes your calories in, calories out thing, by the way, if you wanted to get to that. 2 weeks of eating 4.5 times and more, because there's snacks as well in between, eating that much food by calories in, calories out, you've got to get fat during those 2 weeks or put some fat on. There's no two ways about it because it's the first law of thermodynamics, isn't it? Well, turns out it's not, because the first law of thermodynamics does not apply to an open system. It's specifically formulated to a closed system. That's why it doesn't apply. In actual fact, the thing that controls your body composition largely is your inflammatory status, your endocrine status, your hormonal status. And all of those things are guided in the right direction by eating the right kind of food, even too much of it.
Yep.
So what happens is you become anti-inflamed, or the inflammation that you're carrying drops off. Part of the process of being inflamed chronically is you hold a bunch of water. Your body just goes, whoosh, gets rid of it. So people say, oh, well, you lost water weight. Ah, yes. But I also had one of those biometric impedance scales. They're relatively accurate. They're not, research quality, but they're okay. So plus or minus. Anyway, here's what it told me. It told me that in that 2 weeks, yes, I lost about 15 pounds. 12.5 of that was water, but the rest was fat. Despite consuming well over 4.5 times my usual amount of so-called calories.
Yep, exactly. And I would be shocked if I went to go see those numbers and didn't also see your lean mass in some way besides, water, whatever. Like I would be shocked if your lean mass hadn't increased as well using those scales. So that would be interesting to see. That's something I see all the time in all of my personal training manuals. You'll know this. It says you can't really gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. You kind of have to choose one, and that is absolutely false from everything that I've seen. And I'm sure you would agree with that. And so I love that we went there. Last time we talked about calories. We talked about calories in, calories out. We talked about fiber, the need of fiber, the need of carbohydrates and nutrients that come from plants and animals. Or I'm sorry, from plant foods specifically versus the ones that come from animals. I better give you the opportunity. Is there anything you'd like to walk back from that first conversation, which I found highly educational? Is there anything you want to change your mind about or walk back from that first talk?
Goodness, Casey, I'm always right about all things at all times. I never make mistakes.
Exactly. Silly question.
except for the first time that I was on Jesse's program and I was talking about good salt sources of various electrolytes, and easy enough to do. I misspoke and said, "Oh, yes, a good source of magnesium is, a good source of potassium is Epsom salt." Oh, no. It's no salt that you get potassium from. So anyway, yes, I do make mistakes. There you go. Put it in the books.
Okay, first one. It happened that one time. He made that one mistake. And again, I just started listening to the new episode today. That was the first thing you said. You came on and said, "Hey, I stand corrected. Let me correct this." Yes, so I really do appreciate that. Yep. Just let's start there. I like that topic, and I want to ask you specifically about electrolyte needs. It seems like to me when somebody is transitioning on to a low carbohydrate carnivore diet, and we can talk about doing that gradually, which I know is something you really promote. It seems like the need for salt, electrolytes in general is very, very high, but that seems to wane over time. Like I remember supplementing with electrolytes, and then I just wasn't like feeling right. And once I stopped doing that, I actually felt a lot better. Can you talk about why that might be?
Yeah, my take on it, my theory on it is that basically the means by which your kidney tissues are moving electrolytes one way or the other across the membrane to either keep them in the body or to flush them out, that kidney tissue is reliant on a signal, a chemical signal, at least every other day at minimum, we would hope, where there is some kind of sleeping policeman, a small bump in your insulin. The kidney tissue requires this insulin signaling on a daily basis in order to keep the kidney tissue from becoming too leaky so that your electrolytes just all get flushed out. When you're eating a standard diet full of carbohydrates, the homeostatic set point, the kidneys are used to receiving these massive spikes all the time. And they're the spikes that the kidney is responding to maintain the ability to filter your electrolytes in so that they don't all leak out into your urine. Then most commonly, people just hammer over and change their diet overnight and go, right, I'm going low carb tomorrow or carnivore tomorrow, whatever. And so those huge spikes that they were getting multiple times a day, and now they're just getting here and there. Every time you have a decent meal of protein, you'll have a little bump because protein is slightly insulinogenic. Your homeostatic set point is expecting these huge spikes. And so you need to supplement your electrolytes until your homeostasis realizes that you're no longer going to be doing that and resets itself down to this lower level. Several months in, suddenly you think, oh, these electrolytes are not making me feel good anymore. Now it's because you don't need them anymore, because your body has reset. So I think what you're experiencing is probably, or what you have experienced is probably that. That would be my guess.
Yeah, interesting. Do we need to pay attention to the quality of the salt that we use?
Sure. You don't want to be taking in salt that's got too much microplastic in it, for example. That's not good stuff, obviously. Personally, in this house, there is a Celtic sea salt. There is some Himalayan pink salt, which we better get onto because it's been around for several million years, but it expires next year.
Love that.
flavor. Isn't that hilarious? And we have normal iodized table salt. So those get switched around. And we use one salt for a week or two, and let's change this one. Let's do it's fine. We also have other electrolyte products in the house as well that aren't salt necessarily, although they contain salts. Yeah. So everything that gets eaten here, at least by me, gets liberally salted.
Yep.
But yeah, you just have to find a good quality salt in whatever country you're in.
That's great advice. James DiNicolantonio in his book, The Salt Fix, kind of talks about the self-regulatory kind of taste mechanism when it does come to salt. And he makes a comparison between salt and sugar and says that basically if you're consuming salt, your taste buds will tell you, because you might be eating something that's very salty and it will taste really good, and all of a sudden it will not taste very good anymore. Where sugar is different. Sugar always linearly rewards you for consuming more and more and more of it. And we might think like, well, that's stupid. Why would our bodies adapt to that if sugar is bad for us? And we don't realize the sugar availability was vastly different as we were evolving than it is today. And if you just go to grocery stores and soda stores, you just kind of take for granted that it's everywhere. It's cheap and plentiful and you can find it everywhere. But that wasn't always the case, was it?
No, it wasn't. Most of the time that humans have walked the earth, most of the earth was glaciated under several miles of ice. Most of it. Plant material was very, very rare indeed. And that which was available and edible to humans at all was mostly these fibrous roots, tuber-like things, but not like tubers that we've selectively bred today that are full of starch and all of that. These were just gnarly, rooty, really almost, there were no carbohydrates to speak of or starches available in it. This was something that had to be dug up and boiled for hours and hours and hours and hours to get it soft enough to even consume it. And we have a very small capacity to ferment some of those fibers in the hindgut and release a very small amount of short chain fatty acid by doing that. It was kind of a subsistence thing that humans did when the hunt wasn't successful or the pack animals had moved off somewhere else and they needed to be relocated or whatever it was. So yeah. While humans absolutely can consume some carbohydrate as a rare fix, as a rare treat throughout our history on this planet, we certainly could not go down to a corner store or a supermarket or any of those kind of places and get sugar anytime we wanted 7 days a week. It just did not, it wasn't a thing that we could get. Ergo, there was no evolutionary pressure to have a metabolism that could deal with that carbohydrate. Hence, we don't.
Yep. And I haven't asked you about this question, so you could answer me in any different way, and I would be surprised. But you might be a really good example of this, especially now, timing-wise. You live in New Zealand. I know you live in a more rural area, and the pictures that I see of New Zealand look incredibly lush. It looks very, very green. I know you've commented before that like you don't need irrigation because you've got so much rainwater. So you know it's just summer just finished for you. It's starting into early fall. That means it's harvest season. Describe what you see when you go outside, like right now, prime time. Plants are growing. I'm assuming plants are everywhere. If that's true, and you had to live off the land, how long could you live by just eating the plants that are growing around you? Are you surrounded by bananas and mangoes and those tubers and that kind of thing? Like, could you make it work, or like, are you still surprised that even in harvest season, there's really not that much?
Right. Okay, so we live on a small farm. There are two families that live on this farm, the people that own it and us. We rent a property on the farm from the farmer. There are 2 cows, 4 horses, a goat, several cats, and 4 or 5 dogs that live here. This year has been different from most years, most summers, in that we're actually in a drought situation for the first time in ages. So if I look out the window right now, actually what we have is dead brown grass, not much green at all. Normally it would be quite lush and green, as you said. Not right now. There is a large oak tree, some pine trees up on the hill behind us. That way there's a stream where we get all our water from. If I had to live off this property, in terms of what's growing in the ground, plant mature, there's nothing here that I could eat. Not a damn thing. Maybe it would be possible that a kitchen garden could be planted here and we could grow basic things like lettuces, tomatoes grow quite well here. There is one fruit tree here actually on the property, which produces fruit 2 weeks a year. I forgot about that. But if the world suddenly went nuts again, and and I had to stay on this property and not get anything delivered to this property, and you know the infrastructure of the universe halted, and I had to live off this property, once we've eaten the animals that live here, we're in trouble. Yeah.
So grateful that we have animals like that do have the ability to convert cellulose into high quality proteins and fats that we are absolutely unable to do. So thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry about the drought. That sounds uncomfortable. I hope that reverses itself soon. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, so we're certainly no stranger to severe droughts around here. And they can be quite uncomfortable. So yeah, and you mentioned the garden. Those types of foods thrive really well here as well. And I've done gardens in the past, but the caloric exchange for what you have to do to garden versus what you actually get out of those tomatoes. Like those tomatoes taste really good, but you're putting in 100 times, 1,000 times more calories to try to maintain a garden versus what you get out of it very, very temporarily, you know?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a losing game. You bet.
Yep.
The other thing to keep in mind is that if those of you that eat any plant material, significant amounts, if you go through every plant-based food, so-called, that you eat on a weekly basis, you will find probably that all of them are human inventions, actually. None of them are as nature provided, because we have selectively bred plants for food purposes for enough generations now that we've actually invented our own fruits and vegetables and leafy greens and things.
Yep.
So that's also something to keep in mind. An absolute flash in the pan time-wise since the agrarian revolution. It's like about 9,000 to 12,000 years, depending what part of the world you come from. Humans have been walking the planet for 350,000. And all of that time, we ate 80% upwards the flesh and associated fat of large ruminant animals that we hunted, and 20% rooty tubers that contain no carbohydrates.
That's right.
So that's how it's been.
Yep.
This last 12,000 years, we have suddenly turned our entire nutritional approach completely on its head without giving our genetics any time to adjust to that. And then we've backfilled this ridiculous behavior with a whole bunch of pseudoscience and crack pottery to justify it. It's criminal.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. It's criminal. And yeah, to that point, like when you walk around the grocery store and you see, you know, the apples and the oranges, the oranges do not look like that in nature. Navel oranges are an invention. A Bartlett pear is an invention. A Granny Smith apple, anything you see has been invented. You mentioned the tubers. Like around here, we get these giant starchy tubers, like you mentioned, very little toxins. You can cook them up in many different ways. That is nothing like potatoes the way they were. And even the vegetables, like there's so many different vegetables that we would recognize, like cauliflower or broccoli or whatever. They all come from the mustard plant and were cultivated in the last 100 or 200 years. They weren't a thing. So I think that's really important. I definitely wanted to discuss with you this phenomenon, since it's fresh in my head, of the what we call lean mass hyperresponder. When somebody starts to reduce the carbohydrate in their diet, they feel amazing. all their blood markers improve, save one. It doesn't happen with everybody, but does happen with some people to where cholesterol doesn't go like kind of high or borderline high. It goes like very, very high. Sometimes can be double or triple or quadruple or whatever the normal number is. And it's a scary kind of a thing. And so can you talk about what we've been pursuing, speaking of pseudoscience, what we've been pursuing as a lipid heart hypothesis for so long and believing that cholesterol is damaging versus what we actually know to be true. Hopefully that can help people feel a little bit better about seeing cholesterol numbers that are sky high.
You got it. Okay, right. Number one, scientific statement, and I'm going to word this very carefully because that's what scientists do, actual scientists. Here is a statement. There exists in the peer-reviewed literature not one single paper nor data point which can support the lipid heart disease hypothesis. The lipid heart hypothesis posits and suggests that cholesterol itself, or the low-density lipoprotein carrier of that cholesterol, or indeed a subfraction of that, or indeed a particular protein associated with that, somehow is causal in heart disease atherosclerosis. The reason it's called a hypothesis is precisely because it is not an established cause and effect relationship. To determine cause and effect in science, the requirement is a properly designed, properly powered, properly randomized, properly observed, disciplined, scientific, experimental intervention, where we have two sets of genetically identical human beings separated at birth, locked in labs at birth, treated exactly the same in every respect, except that one of the twins gets an artificially elevated level of cholesterol and the other one does not. And then we see what the outcomes are over the lifetime for heart disease and cholesterol exposure. If we're not doing that, which of course we're not, number one, ethics committees won't allow that. Number two, it's impractical to do lifelong studies on, even if you get ethics, to take someone's life away from them and lock them in a lab for their life. Who's going to do such a study and run it? And number three, who's going to pay for that? So what we have is pseudoscience. We have an inference which is below the level required to say cause and effect is at play here. We have associative data sets. Number one, associative data sets are incapable of informing on cause and effect. You cannot make an inference of cause and effect from associative data. If you do attempt that, you are not a scientist, because that is out with our disciplines. And I will therefore, from that point forward, not respect you one jot as a scientist, and you will end up on a example or an episode of Who's Wrong on the Interwebs. Okay, because that is not scientific communication. Absolutely an unacceptable thing to say. Okay, there's an association though. Is it a good association? Is it a powerful association? Is cholesterol or LDL or any fraction of LDL or the protein associated with LDL, are any of those remotely decent predictors of atherosclerotic outcomes? No, statistically they are not. These are weak associations at best. You would need to be a competent statistician to be able to sort through this data and make that assessment though. And that's the problem. That's why these people that are writing these papers saying, look at this associative data set that's perfectly acceptable as an inference of cause and effect, they say. No, it isn't. False. Your LDL level and your cholesterol level in your blood is almost entirely under the control of your genes. Those genes being reactive, they can up and down regulate the level of all sorts of things in your body, including cholesterol and the carriers of cholesterol. And they do. They react to the conditions in which you place those genes. They've been doing it for at least 13,000 million years. Those genes really know what they're doing. Okay? You do not need to worry about your cholesterol level whether you are a so-called lean mass hyperresponder or not. If you want something a little bit more watertight than that kind of position statement that I've just given you, let me give you some watertight logic to see if you can get your head around this, those of you that still haven't, that is, because I know Casey does have his head around this. Here it is. If cholesterol in the blood causes atherosclerosis, then atherosclerosis would develop evenly across the entire inner surface of your arteries and veins, wouldn't it? Does it? No, it doesn't. Atherosclerosis, heart disease, always develops predictably in set geographical regions, predictable regions, in the high pressure side, the arterial side of the vasculature only, by the way. And the places that these lesions occur are at the bifurcations where an artery splits, Y-shaped, or if you've got something like the aortic arch, which goes like so, then you've got atherosclerosis on the inside of that arch, but not on the outside. Same blood in that vessel, carrying the same cholesterol, the same LDL, the same ApoB100, lesions on the inside of the curve and not on the outside. Now, with that in mind, knowing that as a fact, if you didn't beforehand, now please tell me how it is that cholesterol causes heart disease atherosclerosis to occur. It's impossible.
Crickets. Crickets.
Oh.
Perfect.
There's no way to explain that. So then these buffoons who are still wed to this lipid hypothesis will turn around and say, oh, well, maybe it's fair to say then that cholesterol, LDL, is necessary for heart disease, but not sufficient. Other things have to be at play as well. Great. You've just backed me up then. It's not the cause of heart disease, is it? Because if it was, the lesions would be even across the entire surface of the arteries and veins. It doesn't occur in veins at all, ever, in fact, only in arteries, and only in set regions in arteries. What's the cause? Well, the cause is turbulence in the blood flow at those particular sites, caused by the geographical 3D arrangement of those vein structures and the way that they're designed. To get the kind of turbulence that generally leads to heart disease, you're going to need elevated blood pressure. So, what are the causes of atherosclerosis? Number one, elevated blood pressure chronically. Great. Number two, physical damage, inflammation, injury to those endothelial cells in the vasculature that are becoming atherosclerotic lesioned. So they need to be damaged, injured somehow, and it's the actual turbulence, the pressure on them by the blood taking longer to transit that zone. That's what's pushing against that wall and causing that injury, that inflammation to occur. Then we just need some glycation or some oxidation or both. Now you've got atherosclerosis. Not a damn thing to do with cholesterol or LDL or ApoB100 or Lp(a) or large fluffy or small dense or lean mass hyperresponder or not. Cholesterol does not cause heart disease, period.
Wow.
There we go.
Very, very well explained. I love that. Yeah. I wish people would just ask the one question to their doctors that just say like, hey, why do heart attacks only happen in certain places in arteries and not veins? And then just be quiet to hear whatever comes out is going to be some kind of bumbling answer if an answer is provided. That would tie up any doctor, I would say. Most doctors would not be able to respond to that one thing.
Yeah. That's because there's no way out of it.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so I was listening to another podcast. This isn't a different topic, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I was listening to a different podcast. Two doctors were featured on this podcast, and they were talking about their new kind of scoring system. We talked about this in the past, scoring different foods for satiety per calorie. And so, in theory, they're taking a bunch of different foods and assigning them a value based on how much protein, how much fiber they have, and I believe the third factor is called like hedonic, how craveable or addictive can a certain food be. They assign it a score, and thus people can assess different foods and find different qualities and different combinations to make things easier. And the statement is basically like, we were in the low carb camp. We thought it worked okay, but it didn't include everybody. Carnivore doesn't work for everybody. And so this is a scale that's more accessible and can help people make their own decisions about food. I have my questions. I'm just curious to hear what you think about that.
Number one, as soon as anyone says calories, though, calories, I'm already laughing in my head, going, all right, okay, calories, you say. Calories are a measurement of heat energy, nothing else. Calories are made manifest, if you like. They are embodied, if you like, as photons. Photons with a rest mass of none. So no amount of consuming no mass or expending no mass will change your mass. At least that's how it worked when I went to school. The correct model for what's really going on there is actually not calories in, calories out, as we've alluded to. It's mass in, mass out. Because mass is the thing that will interact with the Higgs field. Mass is the thing that will cause your weight to change on a scale up or down, not photons. So I always throw that one out there as soon as anyone says calories, calories, calories. No, actually, mass of particular food being intaken is the thing that's of value, and it's the nutrient value per mass of food rather than per calorie. That's important, I guess, in this calculation. Other than that, the concept seems fine, that you would suggest that 500 grams of grass-reared, grass-finished steak with a nice cap of fat is likely to be vastly more nutrient dense than the exact same weight of boiled cabbage. Of course it is. So I don't really have a problem with it on that regard. What are your thoughts?
Well, great question. Thanks. I don't like these more complicated systems. I think they released it very quickly without really refining it, first of all. Another problem I have with it is it comes from the creators of Diet Doctor. And Diet Doctor, for me, like on the ground, when I'm working with people who have no idea what the hell this is, that to me was one of the very best resources I could send somebody to at least get some education, watch a few videos, hear some meal plans. This is a really great starting place. Did they have the very best, like cutting edge science and everything from the beginning? Probably not, but it was a really good resource that I could send somebody to. And this new system that they've implemented makes things a lot more complicated, and I can't send people there anymore. So where I used to be subscribed to them and paid for it and used meal planning services to help people during a transition in the beginning was very useful, is no longer that useful to me. So I lament that fact. The other thing that I hear when people are talking about these types of things is they're mostly talking about weight control, weight management. You're looking at calories, you're looking at trying to be satiated with all the fiber and all these different things. What I don't hear them ever talk about is everything that you mentioned on your journey. Are people fixing their digestive issues? Are they fixing their mental issues? Are they not expressing symptoms of bipolar anymore? Like there's such another level of like correct human physiology that treats a vast array of so many other things that is not just what is your mass here on the planet Earth. And so, I have a tough time with it.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go, Brett. If you're listening, keep it simple, sweetheart.
Keep it simple.
All right.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Exactly. We would appreciate that. Yeah. Brett Scher ended up going to Metabolic Mind. I got to see him this weekend and talk to him, and he's now involved with the Metabolic Mind group, and they are working on nutritional ketogenic therapies for people with mental disorders, in particular Matt Bazuki and his family, who kind of started this foundation. They're doing amazing work. Yeah, I just it's difficult to come to understand what a true carnivore diet is and how it can help so many people on so many levels, to then hear like, oh, carnivore doesn't work for everybody, so here's a bunch of workarounds. And I do think that people can bring in plant foods and be okay. It just these types of systems I think are difficult to understand and not quite fully refined. And I also wanted to talk to you about one thing that's not food related. You mentioned this to me last time. You mentioned this in Jesse's episode, and I had been on the fence of this for a long time. If there's anything that I have thought of as kind of woo woo and a little bit weird, it's been this one. And trust me, I'm a person, I walk barefoot as much as I can. My shoes have a conductor, so I can experience grounding, which is what we're talking about, grounding. Connecting to the earth in a certain way. And after I heard the episode, you finally pushed me over the edge to buy a grounding sheet. I found a company, they had a 90-day guarantee. So, okay, great. There's no risk here. Let me just try this. I'm pretty stunned with the results. And I would say, in particular, the depth of my dreams. Tell us about grounding and why it's so beneficial, and if you've noticed those same types of things.
Yeah. So grounding, not crystal waving woo-woo, not hairy-legged stuff like you would imagine. I myself imagined that when somebody first said to me, you need to ground. I'm like, oh, God's sake, I'm a scientist. Come on. And they said, well, if you're a scientist, why don't you check out the science behind this? And I thought, fair response. I hadn't done. So I went and checked it out, and I had to go back to the person that suggested it to me and apologize, because there is quite a significant amount of at least pilot work in small scale studies that does back this up. Here is the idea. As part of living, oxidative process is going on in our body all the time to produce ATP and other things. One of the things that's produced as a side product of that are free radicals that tend to oxidize our body components. Now, what is oxidation? Oxidation is the removal of electrons. Why is it called oxidation? Well, because oxygen is the most powerful oxidant that we know about. So we call it oxidation. It should be called electron stealing, because it doesn't need to be oxygen that does the oxidizing. An oxidizer need not contain any oxygen at all, for example. Oxidation is the removal of an electron or a number of electrons from a protein structure, a fat structure, something in your body. When you start ripping electrons out of things, that changes the chemical conformation of that protein or that fat. When that conformation has been changed sufficiently, it will no longer do its set function well, and there will be a health problem that accrues as a result of that. We've been told our whole lives, and it's been going on for probably about 80 to 100 years now, so longer than most of us have been around. We are being told and led to believe that the place that we are supposed to get our antioxidants from is from our food. And you'll find that the most antioxidant-rich foods, so-called, are those healthy plants, fruits and vegetables, you know. That's what we've been told. So what is an antioxidant from a fruit or a vegetable? It's something like vitamin C is an example of an antioxidant. What vitamin C will happily do is it will give up an electron to a protein or a fat that has been oxidized in such a way as to repair that. Great. So it's an electron donor. Okay. When you ground yourself to the earth electrically, you are now able to absorb electrons directly from the earth into your body, cutting out the need for a middleman carrier of that electron, an antioxidant in your food. Grounding is the most powerfully antioxidant thing you can do. So there's real science going on here. What you're doing is your body is actually absorbing electrons from the surface of the Earth directly. Awesome. So you're repairing oxidative damage that's being done. You're taking care of your antioxidant requirements. Another reason why you need not eat any plants whatsoever. Oh yes, antioxidants though. No, grounding. I ground about 20 hours a day, actually. Do you eat antioxidants 20 hours a day from your plants? No, I win then. Good. So that's one thing. Here's another thing that happens when you ground for a significant amount of time in any given day for a long enough period of time. If you have an abnormal cortisol profile, which would be indicative of a chronic stress situation, that tends to normalize. It's a de-stressor. Isn't that awesome? Inflammation status goes down. Sleep is improved, as you've mentioned, vastly improved. And also what they've done is they put some tracking equipment on people's brainwave activities, and they grounded some people, and they did a false sham grounding on the control people to see what happens. And what they found was that the people who were actually grounded, their brainwave activity changed from fight and flight activity to rest and recuperate activity, like that. Pretty much the second they grounded, boof, brainwave activity completely changes towards rest, recuperation, sleep, etc. Incredible. Wound healing is expedited when you ground. Okay, that's cool. Oh, here's a good one. You know how I said one of the absolute requirements for atherosclerosis is elevated blood pressure, it seems? Well, when you ground, the effective viscosity, the thickness, if you like, of your blood drops. And not a little bit. It drops by a factor of 3. How does that work? The electrons that are entering your body are attracted to the outside surface of all your red blood cells, and they coat them. Thus, the red blood cells repel each other evenly. Thus, they spread out through the blood. Thus, the non-Newtonian sort of thickness of blood is ameliorated in that way. Blood pressure, heart disease risk, bunch of other things as well. Have a look at a video on my channel called In 5 Minutes or Less, Grounding, Earthing, Is This Woo-Woo, or something like that. It's a short 5-minute video or less, and I think there's about 19 papers that I quickly cite during that little short video that people can go and read for themselves if they want to.
Yeah, I'll link. Okay, yeah, I'm going to link that in the notes. This came with my product. I'm just showing a card here that has you can see it's 2 columns, and it's kind of fine print. And there must be 30 different things listed under here that says proven benefits of grounding: reduced inflammation, more restful sleep, reduction in chronic pain, improved blood flow, things we already talked about, decreased muscle tension, reduction in PMS symptoms, reduced headaches. It proven benefits of grounding. Like, there's a lot. I didn't even read a third of the things on this list. Very interesting. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and I was very, very surprised, but it's definitely something that I'm going to continue with. So I really appreciate that you talk about that and you bring that up. You must have tons of stories you've heard out there of people like improving their health through increasing ways to find ways to ground.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow. Oh, man, this has been an awesome conversation. I'm so glad we've been able to talk about a diverse amount of different things. I love chatting with you and getting your ideas about stuff. Before we go, I do want to give you the opportunity, because I know it's something you're very passionate about. And please tell us about the product that you align yourself with. I know you've got a supplement company you align yourself with. I think it's very interesting. I still want to try it, but it's to do with adult stem cells, I believe. Can you talk about that a little bit?
You bet. Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, so obviously the company concerned and my particular link to access buying product through me is on the screen right now above my left shoulder there. There it is, up there. So Cerule is the name of the company. I am an independent affiliate, if you like, or business owner in the Cerule structure. It's a multi-level kind of business, whatever. It's just another way of marketing a product to an end consumer. There's nothing wrong with it. I've found it to be a great company. I'm actually quite good friends with the owners of the company these days. It's because I'm a great bloke. It's not because I'm so successful in Sorul, of course. But as you quite rightly said, the flagship product is an adult stem cell release agent. Now, adult stem cells generally abide and live in the bone marrow of your long bones. And they are released when your bone marrow receives a chemical message of some kind of release agent to tell your body to dump adult stem cells into your bloodstream. These are blank cells that contain your DNA, that are not specialized in any way. They are ready to become any cell in your body pretty much. The only thing these guys can't do, they can't turn into sperm or eggs. Okay, fine. Who wants that stuff anyway? Not me. However, any other cell tissue, including your immune cells and tissues, blood cells and tissues, not just organs and things, anything that is worn, tired, dysfunctional, needs renewal or repair or replacement with a new cell, that's what these adult stem cells do. You are genetically programmed and designed to release fewer stem cells every year. It's one of the ways that the body becomes decrepit, breaks down, and eventually you die. What this product is basically doing is flipping the bird to old mother time, or old father time, if you like, whichever it is, and saying, no, I'd sooner actually have younger tissues for longer. Why do I say younger tissues? Aren't these just a replacement for the old cell at the same age that you are now? No. Every time a cell divides in two, which your cells do to maintain viable numbers of cells, there's a thing on the end of the chromosomes called a telomere. It's like an aglet on the end of your shoelaces, the plastic sheath that stops it from all falling to bits. Every time a cell divides, that telomere gets shorter. When it gets to a critical short length, what then happens is that cell becomes senescent, which means it will no longer divide. Then when that cell dies, its role cannot be replaced by any of its own progeny. Thus, that leaves a hole that needs to be filled with scar tissue, and that's your body starting to break down and the aging process occurring. So what we're doing is we're basically flipping the bird to this genetic lowering of your ability to release stem cells and turning it back up. Absolutely magic, basically. And then so what's happening is every time one of my adult stem cells replaces one of my old cells that needs replacing, it's doing that with a new cell that has a full length telomere. That new cell is biological age 0, not biological age 52, as I am next week. So you could argue that I'm aging backwards. And if you look at photographic records of myself over the last 2 decades, you'd probably say, my word, are you actually Benjamin Button? You probably would.
Well, you certainly don't look 52, and I think we both know how much the diet can contribute to that as well. There's so many people in our community that look like they're reverse aging as well. But it's cool to know that those products are out there. It's something that you really believe in. I know you don't support many companies out there, and so to know that you've been one single one, and you because you were a customer first and then saw the benefit and then it became one of the.
That's right. Yes, I actually bought the stuff retail for 10 years before I decided to become involved in marketing it to people that I have an influence with online. And I started taking this product before I went carnivore. So there was also an interesting separation out there in terms of confounders of things. In my case, the most notable thing that occurred when I started taking Sorul Stem Enhance Ultra is the name of our flagship product. What happened was that around about the time I started taking it, I was diagnosed by the best eye specialist in New Zealand as having advanced wet macular degeneration, which normally you could expect in a man of 70 or 80. I was 39 at that time. And I was told, prepare for legal blindness. This will occur within about 5 years. So by the time I would have been 43, I was expected to be able to see light and movement, perhaps, at least around the periphery, big black hole in the middle, legally blind, can't read, can't drive, that kind of stuff. Nothing they could do about it. Suck it up. Avoid all that saturated fat and meat, they said. Have a nice, balanced, healthy diet, including lots of healthy whole grains, they said. Don't drink. Don't smoke. Don't let blue light into your eyes. Good luck. You might slow it down, but that's all we've got for you, really. If you like, we can inject stem cells into your eyeballs, they said. I said, no, thanks. I don't think I want you injecting anything into my eyeballs. I'm going to try this stuff. Anyway, what are we? 14 years later, my prescription lenses, lower prescription, i.e. my eyesight is better. The macular degeneration has completely regressed. It's gone. There's no sign that I ever had that condition anymore. We're not allowed to claim cause and effect. It's against the company rules. So I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to say is that occurred. There was an association. That's my story. And it happened before I went carnivore. Take that for what you will.
Wow.
Add carnivore to cereal products. Wow, now you've got some synergism going on. So
Wow.
There we go. That's cereal products. There's also a powerful anti-inflammatory called Cyactive, which works on both LOX and COX pathways, but doesn't have the side effects that most pharmaceuticals have. And we've also got a blood flow optimizer to make sure everything gets to where it needs to be. We always suggest a wellness pack of those three products: Stem Enhance Ultra, Cyactive, Plasma Flow. You get a price break for a wellness pack. And also, if you put them on a wellness pack, you won't pay for shipping anymore either. Products are available in 70-something countries and territories around the world, all accessible there.
Excellent.
Yeah. Cool.
That's excellent. And we'll be sure to tag that in the show notes as well. And again, just on our behalf, thank you so very much for taking the time to do this interview. Love your education and love your insight into things. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Right. My primary repository of information about who's wrong on the interwebs and other things as well is my YouTube channel, and that's at Bart-Kay. You'll find me if you go there. You'll also find me on Instagram, Bart Kay _nutrition or something like that. Whatever, you'll find me. And Yellow Ted has a presence on the platform formerly known as Twitter as well. If people are interested in Yellow Ted and his hijinks, he'll be over there doing that.
Excellent. Anywhere else we need to tag, or are those the best places?
I think that's the best.
Perfect. We'll tag all of that in the notes. Professor Bart Kay, like I said, thank you so very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to be on our show today. We anticipate this episode will get a lot of downloads as well and a lot of discussion. So thank you so very much for everything that you do, and thank you for being on our show today. We super appreciate you.
Privilege and a pleasure. Thanks, Casey.
Thank you so much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.